My brother's fiancée chose me as her maid of honor, but later I felt intimidated because I left my ex-boyfriend and was excluded from the event. However, now my brother has decided to cancel the wedding after discovering how I've been treated this week. This was supposed to be a memorable time for my brother Alejandro since he was about to marry his fiancée Valeria. They have been together for a little over 2 years, and their relationship really blossomed into something special. Alejandro proposed to Valeria during a perfect trip to Mexico, and when he returned, his happiness was evident. We all noticed it. The whole family was excited, not just for Alejandro, but also because Valeria is an amazing person, and they seemed like the perfect match. Everything seemed to be falling into place as wedding plans progressed. Valeria had always dreamed of having a grand wedding, almost like a fairy tale. Alejandro, being the dedicated partner he is, was ready to make that dream come true. He didn't want anything less than perfect for her, and took responsibility for the expenses, which was no small task. As an executive manager in a well-known company, he has a good job and worked hard to reach that position, but organizing a big wedding is still a significant undertaking. Nevertheless, Alejandro never seemed to worry about the effort required. It was clear he was completely committed to ensuring Valeria had everything she wanted. The rest of the family, of course, was fully involved, offering support and looking forward to the celebration. We knew this wedding would be something truly special. 2 months ago, Valeria invited me to lunch and asked me to be part of the bridal team, something I honestly didn't expect. You see, I had recently moved back home after living away from my family for several years, so Valeria and I had not had many chances to get to know each other up close before that lunch. We had probably only interacted a few times at family gatherings or events when I was in town, so her invitation surprised me a bit. Valeria explained that my brother would be very happy to see me there with them, and that she saw me as the right person to stand by her on such an important day, alongside some of her closest friends. For some context, Alejandro and I have always been close, and knowing that my presence at the altar would mean something special to him made this gesture even more meaningful. I felt deeply honored by her request. It seemed like not only was she welcoming me to the wedding, but she was also opening the door to a closer connection between us. So, I accepted the invitation. It felt like a significant step toward building a stronger relationship with Valeria, aside from being a meaningful way to support my brother on one of the most important days of his life. Now, I want to mention why exactly I moved back home. It was because I recently left an abusive and toxic relationship. It's still hard to believe that my ex-boyfriend, whom I trusted and cared about, could have turned into someone completely different. We had been together for a long time, and for the most part, our relationship appeared stable and conflict-free. I think that's part of what made everything that followed so hard to understand. There were no warning signs or gradual build-up. He was never the type to raise his voice or act aggressively. Then, without any clear reason, things took a terrible turn in our relationship. Suddenly, his behavior started to change. He became aggressive in a way I had never seen before, and it felt like I was suddenly living with a stranger. He began to yell at me for small things, or would get too close to my face and suddenly get angry. There was a darkness in him I didn't know, and it scared me. Then, one night, everything escalated. We were doing what we usually do, just watching Netflix and relaxing, discussing what movie to watch next. It was nothing heated or confrontational, just the kind of trivial discussion couples have all the time. That's why what happened next was so shocking and devastating. Without any provocation, he turned to me, and before I could even process what was happening, he slapped me in the face. The force of the blow completely surprised me. It was like being ripped from reality. For a brief moment, I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. My cheek was in sharp pain, radiating across my face, and almost immediately tears sprang to my eyes. Not just from the physical pain, but from the overwhelming emotional shock. What disturbed me the most was the expression on his face. He seemed completely indifferent. There was no remorse, no sign of regret. He was utterly apathetic, as if he had done something totally normal. Then, in a cold, emotionless tone, he told me I should never argue with him again about what movie to watch. His tone implied that somehow I deserved what had happened just for daring to express a preference for a movie. After that, he chose a movie to his liking and continued watching as if nothing had happened, leaving me stunned, hurt, and confused. For the first time, I felt that the person sitting next to me could be a monster. That night marked the end of any relationship we had. It became clear that I needed to leave. He was not someone I could trust or feel safe with. It wasn't just the slap, it was the complete lack of humanity in his reaction and the way he considered it acceptable to control me with violence. After the initial shock wore off, I got up from the couch without saying a word and went upstairs. Adrenaline kicked in, and all I could think about was getting out of there. I grabbed my bags and started packing. As I packed, I could hear him yelling behind me, saying I was overreacting and calling me weak for not being able to handle a slap. He was provoking me, saying that even if I went to the gym, I still wasn't strong enough. His words cut deeper than the physical pain. I couldn't believe how insensitive and disdainful he was being, as if he understood or cared about the damage he had just caused. The fact that he tried to justify what had happened by minimizing his actions and making it seem I was wrong for wanting to leave made everything even scarier. This was not the man I thought I knew, and I realized that staying any longer would only lead to more damage. I needed to get out of the situation immediately, so I left, without saying a word, because I didn't want to escalate things further. In the following days, I stayed at a hotel trying to figure out what to do next. On one hand, I felt devastated. He was someone I had been with for a long time. We had built a life together, and his family had become like my own. But on the other hand, I knew I had made the right decision to leave. There was no going back after what had happened, no way to undo the damage or trust him again. When his parents found out what had happened, they reached out to me. I knew they would eventually. They had always considered me part of the family, and it wasn't like I could just vanish without explanation. When they called, I told them everything. I didn't hide anything about how his behavior had drastically changed in recent months, how he had become more aggressive and controlling, and of course, how everything culminated that night when he hit me. To my relief, they were also concerned. They could scarcely believe what I was saying. And like me, they struggled to reconcile this version of him with the son they thought they knew. They agreed that this wasn't like him, and they recognized how serious the situation had become. I think it was hard for them to hear, but at least they didn't try to defend his actions or dismiss my experience. That gave me some comfort, knowing I wasn't alone in acknowledging how wrong his behavior was. Everybody who knew him, including his own family, would have said the same. This was not the person we knew, and something clearly had gone very wrong. That week, his parents visited him and also noticed that something was seriously wrong. It was the way he was acting in general that was erratic and out of character. Alarmed by what they saw, they decided to take him to the hospital for evaluation. It was during this visit that they discovered he had a brain tumor. The news was shocking, to say the least. Suddenly, everything that had happened, all the strange behavior, the aggression, and the sudden change in his personality, started to make sense. It wasn't that he had suddenly become abusive. He had experienced a change in personality because he was dealing with something far beyond his control. The tumor was affecting his behavior in ways none of us could have predicted. When I learned this, I felt a deep sense of relief. That meant the person I cared about, the person I thought I knew, had not suddenly become an abuser. His actions were a result of a medical condition none of us knew about. I began to feel incredibly guilty for leaving the way I did, even though there was no way I could have known what was truly happening at the time. Yet, despite this revelation, it didn't change the fact that things between us were already shattered. We met after the consultation and agreed it would be best to go our separate ways. The tumor explained his actions, but it didn't erase what had happened, and I still resented the slap from that night. There was still so much pain, confusion, and fear hanging in the air that was not something we could just get over. So we made the difficult decision to end things. It was heartbreaking. I had spent so long with him, and despite everything, I still cared deeply. After the breakup, I felt completely lost. It was a lot to process. The trauma of what had happened, the guilt of leaving, and the sadness of ending a long-term relationship that I thought would last. That's when I decided to return home. I needed a fresh start, a change of scenery, and the support of my family to help me heal. This story about my ex is essential because it explains a lot about why Valeria started to resent me after discovering my past relationship. You see, my whole family knows the details of what I went through, and they were nothing but supportive. They understood how impossible that situation was and why I had no choice but to leave. No one ever blamed me for leaving my ex, especially given the circumstances. However, when Valeria found out what had happened, she had a very different reaction. Valeria is quite religious, and her views on relationships and commitment are heavily influenced by her faith. Whenever we gathered for any family event leading up to her wedding, whether it was a lunch or a casual outing, Valeria would occasionally make malicious comments that made me feel judged and hurt. She made it clear that she thought I had made the wrong decision by leaving my ex. According to her, it was wrong to abandon a partner in difficult times, no matter the circumstances. She spoke about how people who leave their loved ones in such situations end up with bad karma. Naturally, this infuriated me. I was already dealing with my own guilt and disappointment, trying to accept the fact that I had left someone overwhelmed with a serious medical condition. Though his behavior had become abusive, it wasn't as if I left easily. It was a decision I agonized over. But at the same time, I knew that I wasn't married to my ex. So I had no obligations and shouldn't be expected to stay in a relationship that had become toxic, particularly when his mood swings and aggression were jeopardizing my well-being. Still, Valeria's comments affected me, making me feel worse about an already painful situation. I confided in my brother about how much Valeria's comments bothered me. However, my brother tried to defend her, explaining that Valeria's perspective was a bit different from mine, and that she had always been taught to persist in relationships. That's why she felt the way she did. He advised me not to take her comments personally, saying that she wasn't trying to be hurtful and that she had good intentions. But that didn't make things easier for me. Every time I saw Valeria, I mentally prepared myself for another remark that made me feel judged for a decision I was already struggling with. Things took a frustrating turn when Valeria and my brother sent out wedding invitations to everyone. She had kindly given everyone a nice note, for which I was grateful, but I returned my RSVP indicating that I would only attend by myself. I wasn't going to bring anyone, since I was still recovering from the breakup and wasn't in a place to have someone new in my life. To my surprise, Valeria started insisting that I invite my ex to the wedding. I laughed at the idea and told her clearly that it was impossible. I hadn't even spoken to him since the breakup, and inviting him to my brother's wedding made no sense at all. I was just beginning to heal, and bringing him into such an intimate family event felt wrong on every level. But Valeria didn't seem to understand that. She kept pushing the idea, repeating how it would be a nice gesture and how I should leave the past behind. She insisted that he must be suffering after I left him, and that I should at least invite him to have fun at her wedding. It seemed like she wasn't even trying to consider my feelings about the situation. Normally, I would just try to ignore her comments, as my brother had suggested, just to keep the peace, but as you can imagine, I was getting really annoyed with her. There was one instance where she crossed the line yet again. We had all gone out for lunch, and Valeria invited the entire bridal team. We were discussing dresses and other wedding details, trying to enjoy the fun and excitement that comes with wedding planning. But of course, Valeria found a way to steer the conversation back to my ex in front of everyone. She brought up the whole situation again and started telling the other girls how horrible I was for breaking up with that poor man after he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. She framed it as if I were a heartless woman who had abandoned him at his most difficult moment. I could feel the tension in the air grow as she continued to portray me as the villain in front of the other bridesmaids. It was humiliating and infuriating. Here we were in a supposedly relaxed setting, talking about dresses and wedding plans, and she was dragging out my most painful personal experience like it was just gossip. It all felt completely inappropriate, and I struggled to maintain my composure while the other girls exchanged uncomfortable glances. Those girls, childhood friends of Valeria who would be her bridesmaids, seemed to share her beliefs and values, probably influenced by their similar religious upbringings. They joined in and began bombarding me with questions about my ex and our past relationship. Their interrogations became relentless, and I could feel my patience wearing thin. In that moment, something inside me broke. It was no longer just about my ex. It was about Valeria's inability to respect my choices and boundaries. Without holding back, I asked Valeria directly what her problem was with me. I demanded to know why she was so obsessed with my breakup and why she seemed to care so much. I had never confronted her directly before, so at first she looked visibly surprised. I could see the shock on her face. She didn't expect me to question her that way, especially not in front of her friends. Finally, she stammered an explanation that left me shocked and furious. Valeria said that now that she was marrying into our family, she felt like if I could leave my partner so easily, it reflected badly not only on her upbringing, but ultimately also on my brother. She went on to say that my brother had always talked about my relationship with my ex over the years, and hearing that I left such a long-term relationship without careful thought reflected poorly on my character, and by extension, on my family and my brother. Her words felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Valeria somehow felt entitled to tell me what I should have done in a situation of which she only knew fragments and pieces. The audacity of her to think that my personal choices had anything to do with her relationship with my brother enraged me. I firmly told her that my relationship with my ex was none of her business and never had been. I pointed out that my life decisions had nothing to do with my family or my brother. I was tired of letting her cross that line and made it clear that I needed her to respect my boundaries and never bring up that topic again. The atmosphere at the table became tense, and I could feel discomfort settling in the group. So I didn't bother to stay another minute. I just walked away. I finally said what I needed to say. Since that heated conversation with Valeria, things between us have only worsened. She never apologized to me, and neither did I. Every time I thought we might get past this, she found new ways to take out her frustration. On me. It started with her criticizing my maid of honor dress. Valeria tried on dresses for everyone else without issue, but when it came to mine, she kept changing her mind. I had to redo my dress 4 times, each time aligning with the wedding theme, but nothing seemed to satisfy her. It became clear that it wasn't about the dress, but about making my life difficult. Because of the tension between us, I didn't want to start another argument, so I accepted the changes, hoping that would end it there. But, of course, that wasn't the case. After the dress issue, she found something new to criticize. This time it was about my complexion. She told me flat out that I needed to get a spray tan before the wedding. I was stunned. I had never had a spray tan in my life and had no intention of starting now, especially not for someone else's wedding. Valeria explained that my naturally fair skin stood out more among her bridesmaids, and she wanted to tone it down so I wouldn't stand out in the wedding photos. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was offensive on so many levels to be told that my skin tone didn't fit her vision. It was insulting and hurtful. I firmly told her there was no way I would get a spray tan just to blend in with her photos. I even offered to stay out of the pictures if it bothered her so much, but I was not going to change my appearance for her wedding. The next issue that arose was that Valeria wanted all the bridesmaids to plan an extravagant bachelorette party for her, which in itself wasn't unreasonable, but her expectations were extremely unrealistic. She insisted that we all contribute hundreds of dollars to take her to an expensive, all-inclusive resort. It was a huge financial request, and I wasn't the only one who found it outrageous. Another bridesmaid protested against the high cost, pointing out that it wasn't feasible for everyone. As usual, Valeria was offended and scolded both me and the other girl during a recent lunch, accusing us of insisting on having that lavish party. But I finally had enough. I set my foot down and categorically refused to give in to her demands. I told her that while I was willing to spend money organizing a nice party for her, I was not about to bankrupt myself spending hundreds of dollars just to make her happy. That seemed to be the last straw for Valeria. In a fit of rage, she started yelling at me in front of her friends and then uninvited me from my own brother's wedding. She told me that if I wasn't willing to spend money with her, it meant I didn't respect her as my brother's future wife. She continued to say there was no place for malicious people like me on her special day, so she didn't want me there anymore. I was in shock. It was incredible to me that it had come to this over something so trivial. To be completely excluded from my brother's big day wasn't just a personal offense. She was actively trying to cut me out of one of the most important moments in our family's life. I felt hurt, angry, and frustrated beyond words. Valeria had gone from making passive-aggressive comments to trying to completely exclude me from my brother's wedding, all because I wouldn't give in to her ridiculous demands. I wanted to argue more with her, but I remembered that my brother loved her and didn't want to complicate things, so I told her, "Fine, I won't go to your wedding. I hope you enjoy it with my brother and the rest of the family." Valeria just ignored me and told me to leave. So, I left. I accepted things as they were, even wanting to fight with her. However, when my brother found out from the rest of the family that Valeria had uninvited me, he understandably got upset. He called me for an explanation, and I told him everything that had happened between us. After that, I'm not sure what exactly happened between Valeria and my brother, but he seemed to have confronted her about it specifically. And I think things did not go well, because this week my brother announced to me and the rest of our family that the wedding was canceled. He was completely refusing to marry her. Now, I feel terrible because my family, in a way, is blaming me for this outcome. They're saying it's my fault for refusing to make minor adjustments for Valeria. They believe that by refusing to compromise on certain things, I might have contributed to the tension that led to the breakup between them. It's frustrating because, from my perspective, Valeria had been treating me poorly for months, and I don't feel that those problems were small at all. But in their eyes, they think that a little more flexibility on my part could have prevented this whole situation. Update 1. To clarify, my family supports me and understands that Valeria has been difficult with me for months. However, they feel that I could have handled things differently, like basically giving in to all her demands. They think that since my brother is so protective of me, he may have reacted a bit harshly towards Valeria, which could have contributed to the wedding cancellation. It doesn't help that Valeria's family has also reached out to us and blamed me for the fiasco. I plan to sit down with my brother and have a more detailed discussion about this to understand what he's thinking. Update 2. It's been a few weeks since my brother announced that he was canceling the wedding with Valeria, and the reality of the situation is starting to set in. It feels surreal to think about how everything changed so quickly. At first, I had hoped things would resolve, and that my brother would find a way to reconcile with Valeria. But as days became weeks, it became increasingly clear that their relationship was beyond repair, and he wanted nothing to do with her. I spoke to my brother about why he suddenly canceled the wedding. It turns out Valeria said many unpleasant things about me and our parents during their fights. My brother confessed that Valeria had always shown some controlling behavior towards him in the past, but he had always brushed it off a bit. However, after I told him that she had been intimidating me for months with her relentless demands, her need to control every wedding detail, and her utter lack of respect for my feelings, he realized she was indeed a very bad person who refused to take responsibility. In some way, she always acted as if she was superior to others because of her beliefs, and he felt that was something he could no longer ignore. So, he ended the relationship. Meanwhile, Valeria continued texting me and leaving multiple voicemails, accusing me of ruining her future. In the voicemails, she was practically screaming at me, saying that I would be punished for my bad actions. I'm thinking about blocking her, especially now that I'm sure my brother will never get back together with her. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my brother canceled the wedding with Valeria. Our parents, who initially blamed me for the situation, have since let that matter go. At first, they thought I might have exaggerated or contributed to the tension between Valeria and my brother. But when I sat down with them and made them listen to the voicemails and read the series of messages Valeria sent before I decided to block her, their perception of her changed completely. They were genuinely shocked, unable to reconcile how someone they had always seen as a sweet, soft-spoken girl could be so cruel and vindictive. Unsurprisingly, they now disapprove of her and are happy with my brother's decision. Since then, they have shown more compassion for my brother's feelings, understanding that his happiness matters more than any wedding plans. In fact, they're not only supporting him, these days they're relieved he made the decision to cut ties with someone that clearly harbored so much negativity. Meanwhile, my brother is doing well. He misses Valeria from time to time, but at the end of the day, he feels what he did was for the best. He understands that staying together would likely have led to more pain and disputes for them both in the long run. My brother and I maintain a close relationship as we always have, and I'm grateful this whole situation hasn't damaged our bond. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like so you don't miss new stories. I wanted to argue more with her, but I remembered that my brother loved her and didn't want to complicate things, so I told her, "Fine, I won't go to your wedding. I hope you enjoy it with my brother and the rest of the family." Valeria just ignored me and told me to leave. So, I left. I accepted things as they were, even wanting to fight with her. However, when my brother found out from the rest of the family that Valeria had uninvited me, he understandably got upset. He called me for an explanation, and I told him everything that had happened between us. After that, I'm not sure what exactly happened between Valeria and my brother, but he seemed to have confronted her about it specifically. And I think things did not go well, because this week my brother announced to me and the rest of our family that the wedding was canceled. He was completely refusing to marry her. Now, I feel terrible because my family, in a way, is blaming me for this outcome. They're saying it's my fault for refusing to make minor adjustments for Valeria. They believe that by refusing to compromise on certain things, I might have contributed to the tension that led to the breakup between them. It's frustrating because, from my perspective, Valeria had been treating me poorly for months, and I don't feel that those problems were small at all. But in their eyes, they think that a little more flexibility on my part could have prevented this whole situation.